Hello everyone and welcome. So today we're going to be talking about the daimyo of Uesugi in Japan. In the background you'll be seeing a video of me playing as Uesugi the first 10 or 15 years, I can't remember exactly. So the Uesugi are a three-province daimyo in the east of Japan, kind of northeast. One of the very few daimyo in Japan that start off with more than two provinces. Most actually start off with just one. And while we kind of will be rating all daimyo, Japanese daimyo in this video, there are a few reasons that I chose Uesugi. First of all, before I played this game, I already knew who they were. I mean, I knew a little bit about them. And the little history info thing that comes up at the beginning of the game is pretty informative on the basic information about them. So it reads, the Ashikaga shoguns have placed eastern Japan under one of their own family members, the Kamakura Kubo. The Kamakura Kubo, however, has often sought to act independently of the shoguns in Kyoto, using his office to build a personal power base in eastern Japan. As the most influential of the eastern daimyo, the Uesugi have often tried to limit the ambitions of the Kamakura Kubo, claiming to take the side of the Ashikaga shogun against his kin in the east. Through these conflicts, it has become clear that many of the lords of the east, and the Uesugi in particular, will need to rely on their own strength to defend their interests. At the end of 1444, the east is quiet but volatile. The Uesugi remain the strongest faction in the region, but this strength is only backed up by their own capability to defend themselves. So EU4 starts right before the period of Japanese history known as Sengoku, or the Warring States period, of which Uesugi was one of the stronger clans in the region. Their power lasted until about 1600, when certain groups made an effort to unite Japan under their own rule, and the Uesugi chose the wrong side. They fought on the wrong side, and they lost, and their power was drastically decreased going into the 17th century. But more important than its history is the actual gameplay of Uesugi. So I chose them partially because I know them from having read previous history, partially because they have a good color. I like colors on the grayscale are kind of pretty rare in this game. White, black. Actually, I'm not sure there is a single black colored nation in this game. Well, no, there's one right here. Chiba's right south of me. I think it's a welcome break from all the colors of the rainbow you get in this game. But I also like them because, unlike most of, as I said, unlike most of the other daimyo in Japan, Uesugi starts out with three provinces, which makes them just a little bit stronger and gives them a heads up against most of their surrounding neighbors. But as a disclaimer, I should say this before I get into the meat of the video. I played as Uesugi. I did not finish the game. My goal was to unite Japan as Uesugi and not form Japan, but to stay as Uesugi. And I did that, and then I started colonizing and trying to break into the continent, East Asia, of course. And I lost interest, but more on that later. So particularly after the East Asian focused updates of about a year ago, I think it was, playing in Japan has become a lot of fun, at least in the early game. I had never done it before, and then I played them about 6 months ago, 3 or 4 months ago actually. And I was legitimately blown away by it. It truly felt magical to play in Japan. It was like playing in the Holy Roman Empire, the HRE, but with no one else around you. You're kind of isolated in this incredible area where everything seems so important because everything's happening, and you have all these different little guys who are almost as strong as you or about as strong as you, vying for control. And you have so many different people to focus on diplomatically, militarily. You have to weave a network of relationships that allow you to get the upper hand while not going crazy with aggressive expansion or anything. I mean, aggressive expansion is extremely important early game here because most other people are about as strong as you or maybe barely weaker than you. So kind of like in the HRE, you get this kind of ebbing and flowing of gameplay where for a few years you'll be taking a lot of territory, and then you'll get up to a threshold of aggressive expansion, and then you'll kind of have to wait for that to die down. But all in all, Uesugi is one of the most fun starts I've ever had to a game. It's thrilling, it's extremely engaging. There's just so much going on. So I'm going to give it a 9.5 out of 10 for the start. So second, we'll focus on their ideas. I used to lump ideas and events together, but I realized that doesn't really make sense because ideas affect their strength and events are more just flavor. So events will come later. I'm right now just going to focus on their ideas, their national ideas. So their traditions are plus 10 production efficiency and yearly army tradition decay minus 1%, which are both okay. I mean, army tradition decay -1% isn't really that big of a deal. I mean, it's nice, but it's not huge. Production efficiency is pretty good, plus 10%. That's definitely pretty good. That's if I recall correctly, my production ended up being pretty strong in this game because of that. Other ideas are first diplomatic relations +1, which is, I guess, kind of useful in the early game because there's so many different people you're dealing with and negotiating with here. But I don't know. I'm never impressed by +1 diplomatic relations. I mean, maybe that's just me. Second is yearly army tradition plus 0.5, which is pretty good. I mean, that combined with the -1% decay allows you to get much better, maintain much better army tradition, which is nice. Third is reinforced cost -25%, which is all right, although I've never found that to be particularly useful either. I mean, it's very situational. Fourth is morale of armies plus 10%, which is always good. Fifth is spy network construction plus 20%, which by the time you get that, I mean, I understand that could be kind of useful early game, although honestly, you don't necessarily even need spy network construction in the early game because you get casus belli. You get a free casus belli on everyone in Japan for Sengoku. But particularly by the time you get this spy network construction plus 20%, it just doesn't seem like it would be that useful. I mean, it's just never that useful anyway. Sixth is discipline plus 5%, which is good. It's not great. It's not the discipline that you get when you're actually as Japan proper. And seventh is idea cost minus 10%, which is very good, although it's at the end, and by that time you'll have unlocked more than half of your ideas probably. So I'm not going to complain about that, but it's not nearly as good as it would be at the beginning. And last, their ambition is infantry combat ability plus 10%, which is good. I mean, they do have a pretty heavy focus on military ideas. So I think I'd give their ideas, I'd rate it probably about a 7 out of 10. Good, but not like stellar. So where Uesugi and any of the daimyo fall short is the game after you unite Japan. In my case, as I said, I united Japan, but I did not form Japan. I just controlled all of Japan as Uesugi. And the mid to late game is actually so problematic that I didn't finish it. As I said, I quit maybe in the mid 17th century because I've played a lot of games in East Asia, and by the time you form Japan or unite Japan, you're then just forced to play the same as every other game in East Asia. Like, there's the Ming, you can maybe go for the Ming or try to break in somewhere else. But it's hard since you're not connected to the continent. I think I tried to go up through the Manchu tribes, Zhangzhou, Yera, and Haishi, and I had limited success with that. I also did some colonizing in the South China Sea, South Pacific, Southeast or Southwest Pacific. And I know it's really saying something that by the time you get to the point where you can focus on the outside world, the rest of East Asia is actually ahead of you in technology and particularly in institutions. And like I said, I know that's really saying something because East Asia is like the worst, nearly the worst situated for institution gain. But that's the way it is. I mean, institutions spread to you even slower than they do everyone else. So for overall gameplay, I'd probably give Uesugi, you can just read that as Japanese daimyo generally, or Japan, a 4 out of 10. There are some things you can do, and there are different ways you can go, but it just is a huge hassle, and it just ends up being kind of samey. And finally, let's get to role-playing and events, which I figured it makes more sense to put events with role-playing. And this is where Uesugi shines, in my opinion. I think role-playing is one of the more subjective aspects of rating countries, but I'm very interested in Japanese history. I majored kind of half in Japanese history, and as I said, I'm interested in Uesugi because they're kind of this rogue daimyo in the east that's as nearly as powerful as the shogun himself, but not under the shogun's zone of control. And of course, as any daimyo, but as Uesugi, you can form Japan, which is kind of the one thing you can form. And usually name switches are desirable. Usually that's what you want to do. That's like the fun part is changing names, forming someone new. But forming Japan just seems so, it just seems so easy. It's like, it's what you're supposed to do. It's so expected that I actually did not end up doing it. So that's actually a negative against Uesugi's favor. But beyond just basic role-playing, the events that the game gives you are extremely well done. Most of them are just Japanese events that are very good generally. it doesn't matter if you're playing Uesugi or Shiba or Date or Hosokawa or what. You're going to get a huge number of events for Japanese daimyo that focus on the isolationism of your country, of your relations with the shogun, of your relations with your fellow daimyo. And I think, if I remember correctly, I think Uesugi even gets its own special events because it's kind of the big shot of the East, other than the shogun. Uesugi is kind of the big guy. So overall, their events, the things that happen to them, things that the game makes happen to them are very good, very well done. So overall, I think I'd probably give their events and role-playing a 6.5 out of 10. The events part is very good. The role-playing side is less. I really just think that forming Japan is not interesting. It's just so obvious. And then otherwise, I mean, there's not that much else you can do. I think it's fun to play as Uesugi, but there's not that much you can do with it. So yeah, this has been a Rate That Country for Uesugi, which you can superimpose on any Japanese daimyo, except probably for the Ashikaga shogunate itself, because I've never played it as them, and I don't know how different they are. This series is it's been a long time since I've made one of these videos, and this series, I think, could use some work. I could flesh out the categories a little more. And Siri just thought I was talking to her. So let me know if you have any suggestions for what you think I should do. And this series is, I mean, it's not really about, it's not kind of a super objective, like how good is this country at taking over the world. It's more about just how fun it is to play. So I tend to not rate things based on, you know, how much money you get or how big your army is or whatever. Although a good army can make for a more fun game, but sometimes a small army can make for a more fun game. And that's kind of why Uesugi is so much fun, because at least in the beginning, because everyone has a small army and you're kind of negotiating. You have 4,000 guys, the other guys have 3,000 guys, or you have 6 and the other guys have 5 or whatever, and you're moving around in that. So I think, in essence, the early game of Uesugi is a lot of fun until you unite Japan. Uesugi is an absolute blast, and then after that, you're just kind of, it's the same thing as anyone else in East Asia. It loses its specialness once you're kind of finished with the intra-Japan section. Thanks everyone for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.